Hi, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Turn down the music a little bit. Keep a little bit in the background for, I don't know, spiritual effect. Well, so I'm back again pretty soon after I did my last one. And as I mentioned in the last one, I've been silent for a number of reasons, partly personal, in the midst of having a baby with my new wife, and part of which is very much part of my spiritual journey. I went through another phase of, I guess what you would call revelation and integration of new information. Those can be very painful things for anyone who is familiar with the joy of being a prophet of one type or another. And as I've told you in other episodes, each of us, in our own way, is training to be the prophet of our own godhood and the Messiah of our own creative idea that catapults us to the God levels of spirituality in a way that's defined by the latest laws of free will, reincarnation, and karma, which have changed. And that leads into the topic for today, which is going to be an explanation of some of the finer points of this idea of a 7-day creation that's presented in Genesis, and combining that with the research I've done in other historical and sacred writings of ancient times, the revelations of other people that I consider prophets in their own right, of the arts, the sciences, everything that one might have some divine inspiration to express and to create new ideas which effectively become spirits in their own right, which is kind of the Omnist way of viewing all thought, all religions, all ideologies, all theories, etc. And these are ideas that are inspired by various spiritual sources, not all of which are in alignment with the first creator, God. And thus, we have all of the turmoil and contention that we have in the spirit world, about the spirit world, between those who believe in God, those who don't believe in God, those who believe in a certain kind of God with a certain name and a certain set of properties and a certain dogmatic belief of the nature of life and reality, and others with a different one. And as I have told you about my take on omnism, it is not necessarily what other people may think is omnism or pantheism, because my take on it is that there is a source of truth in all religions, in all spiritual experience, but that truth is filtered through the perception of the beholder, which in our tradition, the beholders have been humans, or humans who had direct contact with other spiritual beings, maybe other species at one point or another. And there's a certain amount of contention about that in the scholarly debates about the Bible and the Sumerian writings and the Rig Vedas, for instance. So we're going to touch on a lot of those topics. And what I will tell you is that what I'm going to give you here is a combination of my study, my weighing of sources in the light of the reality of science and the reality of human nature, which are things that are pretty much immutable. I mean, yes, they're considering doing transhumanist things now and modifying humans to be different than they are. And, that's a huge part of what's going on now with the pursuit of science, especially the pursuit of science by those motivated by greed, power, narcissism, some of the more negative aspects of human nature. Now, does that say that those things are necessarily bad? No, of course not. They can be very short-sighted. And I think a lot of the spiritual rationalization for what's going on in the world today is very short-sighted and based upon what I call spiritual communism, which is how I class this kind of belief, this we're all one, we're all God, silliness. It makes no sense to anybody who has any conception of science that we would be part of God, experiencing a reality show in this body, as opposed to an individual soul, an individual consciousness, maybe one that started out in the same place as God, learning and growing through incarnation experiences, which is core to the teachings of Hinduism and is the piece of that religion that I think is most pertinent. And we'll touch on that again later in context of how does the creation story of the Bible mesh with the creation stories we see elsewhere in both writings and oral traditions and so forth, the fossil record, whatever, of cultures that don't exist anymore, but seem to have a lot of common characteristics, a common set of stories, themes of stories in their creation myths. Okay, so that said, the other thing is that I'm going to be combining it with my own personal spiritual experience. The revelation that I've had and that I've been continuing to have since, I started on the fast track to the spiritual being that I am today, about 5 years ago. And I can't expect you to accept any of that at face value. And I do expect you to respect it, especially if you've had spiritual experience of your own, and especially if you're open-minded enough to think, well, if I had this particular experience, maybe others who are reporting similar experiences, but maybe from the prism of their own belief system, their own religion, whatever, they could interpret it differently. And this is my take on why, the prophets or the seers or the gurus of different religions, different spiritual traditions, have very different ideas of what the truth is. It's not that, in a postmodernist sense, there is no truth, and everybody's truth is fine. You can create whatever you want and believe whatever you want and be whatever you want just with the flick of your imagination. This is not true. This is dangerous falsehood, and it contributes to another term that I'll refer to quite frequently as spiritual narcissism. This idea that you can make reality, make physical or spiritual reality, whatever you want it to be. It's just flat out not true. Now, it is based in truth, as all things are, but it's based on a very limited and self-centered understanding of the truth. Just because one person seems to be able to manifest what they want and have this wonderful life of being a guru and getting all these speaking gigs and being worshipped and admired by the world for their pronouncements of blah, 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 Neo-Buddhism or cosmic oneness or whatever they happen to be touting, doesn't make it true, no matter how many believers they have. Now, the number of believers can lend that idea spiritual energy. That doesn't make it true. And the spiritual energy you can create in this one small solar system, on this one small planet, in the vast universe of universes, is relatively small. However, it can make a big difference. Because, as I've told you before, the multiverse is based upon what is essentially a fractal pattern. And local disturbances in the force, through spiritual interaction, either individual or group, and of various levels of expertise and ability, can create localized changes in the fractal, create new patterns. Those patterns sometimes spread. They sometimes die out. In order for a pattern to spread across an entire universe or across the multiverse, all universes, it has to be a pretty incredible pattern and have been tested very well for flaws. And that, in essence, as I've told you a number of times, is what's going on with what I call the Gaia experiment. Now, let's get back to, well, how does the 7-day creation story relate to that? Okay, one of the first things you have to understand, and anybody who's a biblical scholar worth their salt does understand, is that the word translated as God in the Bible, in at least most instances in Genesis, if not all, again, I'm not going to tell you I know more than the most erudite biblical scholar, or the most erudite scholar of the Sumerian writings, or the most erudite scholars of the Rig Veda, or any other spiritual tradition. I have looked at most of them, and from a comparative viewpoint, to see what are the commonalities, what are the differences, how do I explain those in terms of my religion, my knowledge, my spiritual experience. And that's what I'm presenting to you here. Okay, so one of the first things you have to understand is that the word used in Genesis that's translated as God is actually Elohim, a plural meaning essentially the enlightened ones, the illuminated ones. Now, some people believe that refers to some species of space beings that came and colonized the earth and are maybe still using it for nefarious purposes to control and manipulate humanity. And that's kind of the essence of the dystopian views of the bigger picture of history, that, say that Earth is a prison planet, or it's part of this matrix that we're all being used and controlled and fed off of. And there are elements of truth to all of that. I mean, they wouldn't be popular ideas if there wasn't an element of truth in it, and a reasonability that would be able to capture the minds of people that are exposed to this particular interpretation of truth. However, what I know is the truth is that the Genesis story actually maps closest to the fundamental creation story of how physical universes started to be created. Now, it's done very much in the context of one planet, one solar system, and it focuses on describing what's going on in this 7-day paradigm of events. If you look at those events, they map pretty well to what I would think of as a very spiritual scientist way of thinking of creation. And there are many Bible believers who find it fairly easy to reconcile the Bible with materialist science. And just say, well, okay, there was some supreme creator that set up all these laws and made us act the way we are, and it's all under the control of God, and we have some individual sense of empowerment because we don't realize the processes that are going on in our brains that are making our decisions for us. And there are some Christians who have a very fatalistic, deterministic view, materialistic view of their religion. And they find it fairly easy to conform to atheist materialist thinking, and are the kind of Christian you'll very much find in the Borg cult of globalism, who can rationalize what's going on, their decisions, their selfish decisions, and short-sighted decisions as being, well, I deserve this because I'm a follower of Jesus, I'm a follower of Allah or Muhammad, whatever. This is not unique to Christians. It's not unique to any religion. And it's especially obvious in the followers of this so-called cosmic oneness cult, who believe that they can do anything because they're not really doing it. They're just God playing a little fun experiment with himself in your body. And, it kind of takes the personal responsibility away from the whole thing and makes it just a game you're playing. And hey, I'm just doing the best I can as my avatar in this game that we're all part of, and we're all going to return to source and kumbaya, and we're going to all laugh at the fun things we did in this simulation that we experienced. Yeah, okay, you can believe that. I think if you think it through, that you will find that this leads to some pretty narcissistic thinking, the ability to rationalize almost anything. And this is a position which is very much encouraged by commercial media and state media, because it is where they want you to be, to basically be programmed by what they tell you to believe. And they can adjust your beliefs through media, especially effective through what's supposed to be entertainment, but which effectively is indoctrinainment. And I can go into that if ad infinitum, and I don't want to get sidetracked here, but suffices to say that what I'm going to tell you is maybe not going to be a popular view, may make me the attack victim of every cult, every form of spirituality, but it in fact is consistent with observable truths and science. And if you want to debate that, let's debate that. If you want to just attack me and gaslight me and astroturf me, that's your choice too. But you're only demonstrating how much a member of a cult you are by doing so. Okay, anyway, so what's up with this 7-day creation? I'm not going to talk about the first 6 days because I think they're pretty straightforward. But what happens at the point when Genesis starts talking about people, about individuals? What's going on with that? About gods and angels and, definite spirits. It starts giving names to things instead of just the Elohim, the gods, plural, or the enlightened ones. This is the interesting part of Genesis, and what makes it uniquely useful, as in contrast with the Vedas. The Vedas tell a part of this story, but it's very, very much focused on the seventh day. What is the seventh day of creation? The day of rest, the day God rested. Now, the dogmatic Christian belief is that God was done and everything was perfect and there was nothing left to create, nothing left to do. So God just sits up in heaven enjoying his wonderful creation and telling people what to do to live their lives if they want to be seen as virtuous in his sight. And then, you start asking yourself, well, how does evil happen? And why is there still evil? And why can people choose not to follow God? And, you get onto all these tough philosophical issues that are the core of the arguments folks use to attack religion. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what the seventh day really was and what it means when God rests. Okay? In my view, which I'm absolutely certain of, God was not an all-powerful, almighty, micromanaging creator of everything. God was simply the first creator, maybe not even the first creator, but the first one that was able to create something that didn't implode on itself. It was sustainable and started to grow and expand exponentially. That's essentially the observable facts of whatever the Big Bang was and what we're finding out about the acceleration of the expansion of the universe. It's what we're grudgingly having to admit from the obvious fact that order in some parts of the universe is actually increasing, not decreasing, as the materialist scientific view of the second law of thermodynamics would indicate. I mean, that's the core of why most serious scientists believe in some sort of creation, even if it wasn't the creation of the Bible or any other religious tradition, that there must have been some intelligent design involved. And I mean, that's essentially the core of the matrix idea, which I talk about a lot because it's a good paradigm from which to look at all this, even though it is a dystopian one. The whole matrix idea is that, yes, we're living in a simulation created by some evil beings who milk us for our energy, our spiritual energy. And that's rooted in some truth, because there are dark spiritual entities who are trying to maintain their existence, their power, through using the energy of others. And I mean, combining spiritual energy is the essence of prayer. It's the essence of all magic, spiritual magic and physical magic, which are essentially the same thing. It's just that the stuff we call spiritual are based upon laws we don't understand yet. And the stuff we call physical are based on laws that we can see in practice. And, yes, there are, well, let's look at some of the odd facts about the Sumerian creation story. Is it very much focuses in on the part of the Gaia experiment where the solar system was forming. The planets were forming and going through gyrations, colliding with each other, creating the asteroid belt, resulting in the odd configuration that we have of the Earth with so much water on its surface, and the Moon, ideally planted at just the ideal spot for eclipses and to create these very interesting phenomena called lunar tides, which are, a much more visible manifestation of tidal forces that are in play all over the multiverse. We have solar tides, which come from the yearly season. We have lunar tides that come from the lunar revolutions. We have other tides that we're only becoming aware of that are the result of our path through the Milky Way and the Milky Way's path through the rest of the universe, and how those paths all intersect with those of other universes that are closely connected to ours, which, again, if you follow the latest developments in quantum physics, you know about entanglement and strange action at a distance. This would have been thought of as, the ravings of a religious lunatic, even 100 years ago. And now it's established fact. They've proven it. And, so the frontiers of science are getting closer and closer to the boundaries of spirituality and science every day. And a lot of what's going on in this world is a pushback against that, because a lot of people have profiteered from the pseudoscience of how can I put this nicely? Religions of control. The Catholic Church was founded as a religion of control. There's no other way to look at it. The books that were removed from the Bible, the changes that were made, the persecution of unpopular Christian groups, which there were many who believed a lot of different things. That's why Christianity was such a successful religion when it took off, is because there were a lot of different groups you could believe, and each one had their own sort of mythology and their own tribe. And some of them grew, some of them didn't. Some of them were really far out there and, didn't attract many adherents. This is why another thing that I'll quote many, and direct you to many times is to watch Monty Python's Life of Brian. It's maybe irreverent to a lot of religious tradition, but it's a very, very wonderful look at religion and human nature and how religions form, how cults form, and how the truth could be buried within that cult and reflect only a very small portion of what actually happened. And so I would recommend watching that movie at least once a year, wherever you're at, in terms of your own research, your own search for knowledge, just to kind of recalibrate yourself and take a look from the outside at where you're getting to and say, am I falling into one of these shoe waving camps of cult that do develop? And a lot of people are hearing for the first time the term mass formation psychosis right now, and this is a thing, and this is a thing that has been going on for as long as humanity has had this advanced brain that allows it to think things that aren't necessarily true, to have ideas that could be pretty bad ideas when they're put into practice. At any rate, so what is the seventh day of creation? How does God rest? Well, here's my take on it. The first creator came up with the first laws of the multiverse. Now, what were those first laws? I can't tell you exactly what they were. I don't know the detailed history of that time. Maybe it's in my brain somewhere. I only know bits and pieces of it that resonate with the spiritual experience that I've had, which was hard to describe, but it informs everything that I've done in the last 5 years of my life. So the story that I'm going to tell you about how it all worked is one around once, and you'll find this in my book, and actually this whole talk today is maybe going to be a little bit rambling because it's all kind of gelling together stuff that I'm planning to add to a major revision of my book, and this will help me congeal it into. It's not so much that I'm going to change any of the information that I gave you before. It's that I'm going to add more context to it and connect some dots that hadn't connected for me yet. But at any rate, the first creator created the first laws of. Now, what if you were the first creator? What would be the first thing you would want to do? Is create your first child, your first disciple. Okay, and so in my belief, my knowledge, creation started with the creation of other souls, and this is the essence of the as above, so below. You're created in God's image. Every soul starts out as an independent consciousness with free will and with a certain lineage that results from the order of creation of all of these consciousnesses and how the laws of the multiverse have evolved through the activity of all of these independent consciousnesses. So, if a new law comes along, is proposed, God doesn't just say, "Let there be light." And that's not what the Bible says either. Elohim said, "Let there be light." It was a group decision. And the way these things work in reality is when something is manifested in the physical world, it's as a result of an idea of creation. Now, in the early creation, these ideas were around establishing the speed of light, establishing the properties of hydrogen, helium, the basic laws of chemistry, star formation, what causes supernovas, what causes black holes, did they always exist? No. I'm saying that they were ideas that naturally developed from other ideas, and many of those ideas didn't originate with God. The early ones probably had a lot of influence, and most certainly some ideas show a strong chance that they were influenced by God. Because what I believe God is most concerned with is the creation of souls and development of souls into useful creators. Okay? I mean, if I was a creator, and I have been in many incarnations of my corporate life, good creators, the first thing that they do when they've got a great creative idea is go out and proselytize it and try to find other people who are going to work on it too, because they don't want to have to do all the work themselves. And that is the essence of any successful idea in human history. It's how corporations work, it's how technology works, and it's how we're creating computers to work and AI to work. Distributed computing is where it's at. We're done trying to make the most powerful single computer ever that can solve every problem. That idea went out like 20, 30 years ago. We just ran out of runway, and now all the difficult problems that computers are solving are being done by distributed systems. Taking a piece of the problem and munching on it, and then sharing results and into one whole. And even the most advanced simulations that are done for, the fanciest chips, the latest microprocessor or whatever, are all done with that kind of an idea that there's multiple processes, multiple computers, multiple cores working on a problem and distributing the load of what would be an insolvable problem of testing and simulation amongst a large number of processors. And this is essentially what spiritual creation does. Why would what we're doing with technology as a species be any different than what our creators would do with spiritual technology? As above, so below. Okay, so what is this seventh day of creation? how does God rest? I am going to propose to you that one of the biggest laws ever created are the set of laws called free will, reincarnation, and karma, which have changed. We've always had free will. Every soul that was ever created has had the ability to think for themselves. Now, are they influenced by God? Absolutely. Are they influenced by other spiritual entities? Absolutely. And this is why physical incarnation was invented. And it started something like this. Okay, think about early Genesis. You've got no sentient beings except these creators who say, let there be light, let there be planets, let there be this, let there be that. And it all sounds very deterministic and ordered. And you could say, okay, so this is some advanced alien species who can control nature and made our solar system and made our planet for their own purposes. This is where that kind of thinking comes from. However, at some point, you can imagine that these creators making this physical world would get tired of just watching what is essentially, a spiritual version of old black and white TV, pre-World War II TV or movies. And it's like, well, this is fun and interesting, but you know what? There's not really anything that's all that engaging here. And imagine if God said, you know what, I think I have an idea to solve that. You know what? How about if we made it so that we could go inhabit these things we've created? That you could actually feel what it was like to be a planet. You could feel what it was like to be a plant, to be this, to be that. And, it would be like, wow, today somebody invents some hot new virtual reality game and everybody wants to play it, right? Because you're able to get an experience that you couldn't get before. Even though you might be very limited in that environment, even though you might not be able to get any sustenance there, and you might run out of credits because you didn't spend enough time in the real world to earn your daily bread. But we have people who basically are trying to figure out ways to spend more and more time in what's being called now the metaverse. And this is essentially a virtual reality where it's becoming so real that you could actually have more fun and enjoyment and interest in participating in that than you do on the outside world. And this is a big worry for many people right now and a big point of discussion. But anyway, this thing happened before with the souls who lived in the disembodied world of pure spirit. And was God being crafty? Was he being manipulative? And yeah, probably. We all have that element in us. And that's another, pure fallacy that is driving a lot of dystopian thought, is that any supreme power would act totally altruistically and always make the right decision and do the best for the common good. This is asinine. And everybody who's observed what's happened in totalitarian countries and countries that become dominated by corporate technocracy, which is essentially where the U.S. is right now, can see how stupid that idea is. You concentrate more power in the hands of a free-willed soul, and they will tend, especially the ones who are desirous of power and have this strong streak of narcissistic self-worship, will really lose their minds. The more power they get, the more dystopianly they act. And to think that God would be any different is absurd. And so what I'm telling you about the seventh day now is that at some point, after souls had gotten a taste of what it was like incarnating and getting to occupy pieces of the physical world and have some control over them and feel the sensation of being a star or being a whatever, a little trick was played on them, another trick, saying, you know what, this is fun, but there's not really any sense of a game here. You're just doing the same things over and over and over, and there's not really a sense of winning or getting ahead. And you still feel like, you're stuck in this place where here's God and all the senior souls who know more than you do and always will, sort of dictating everything to you, and you feeling like also rans. And, there were wars in heaven. Many are described in spiritual writings, and when the gods came to earth, there were gods at war on earth. And so the idea that God prevents conflict is completely absurd. It is not in evidence in any way, shape, or form that we can see, and it's not something that is ever going to happen. No matter how much you wish everybody was one and we could all sing Kumbaya and end war because we won't let anybody think about war. That's Borg think. That's hive-minded think. It's not going to work. It's been tried before and it doesn't work. And there are hive-minded species out there just desperate to get their souls back. Because here's how hive mind species work. Okay? This is what ants and bees are like. They have a few elite members who are carefully bred and have all the power. And they have basically gotten their civilization to the point where the thought of all the other members of their species is controlled remotely, turning them essentially into what are early versions of what I call virtual souls. And if you are one of the people, many people here today who feel like I don't have any control, I'm just a piece of the machinery, and if I do what I'm told and I obey all the rules, then everything's going to be as good as it possibly can be for me, and that's the best way to live life. And if I have any thoughts outside that, that's probably my ego, and that's a bad thing, I've got to kill it. And this is the dark place that you go when you start this cosmic oneness thinking, ego death, neo-Buddhist bullshit. And yes, Omnists can call other religions bullshit. They may be useful bullshit for some people, and it may fit their experience, but it's not the full truth. And it can be a very dark truth if you're a soul that doesn't really like to be put into this box. Humanity wasn't a very good species for you to choose to be incarnated into, because it's not a hive mind species. And no matter how much these people try to turn it into a hive mind, it never will be. Now they are executing a spiritual experiment of folks that do want to do that. That's happened to many species. It's an idea that's still very active in the dark universes, started by souls that wanted to go their own way, because God doesn't force you to obey. What happened with the laws of reincarnation and karma is they've been refined to the point that God's universe, the first physical universe, is not the only one. There are parallel ones with similar timelines, and there are really far away ones that are based upon fantasy land. That's why in our dreams we'll see spirit elves and strange creatures that don't exist in nature and have all sorts of wild and mystical experiences. There are places, anything that occurs in our mind is an image of something that either has manifested before and is being projected to you for whatever reason. Sometimes might be just random spiritual waves that you're picking up. Other times it's very directed and can seem like demonic possession or stimulation by divinity. This is the source of divine revelation. It's the same process as demonic possession, and there have been many who have felt the touch of divine inspiration and reacted to it negatively, and have become some of the strongest proponents of anti-spiritual thought, because spirituality must be something evil and occultish and harmful. Piece of the truth, and it's how you choose to react to the spiritual inspiration you get, whether you interpret it to be from a good source, bad source, a useful source, an unuseful source. They're all possible things, and there's no guarantee that reaction is going to be the right one. This is where your own choice, your own soul, your own feeling, your own decisions, your own free choice comes into play. So this seventh day is of rest. Here's my take on it. Once the laws of reincarnation and karma were sort of started, well, reincarnation came first. In other words, the ability to take physical form and feel what it was like to be a star. That would be, if you could do that, and then you could go, okay, click back. Now I'm back in the spiritual world where I can hobnob with any other soul I want to on a moment's notice, and have unlimited ability to think and to manifest in my mind anything, whether it's something that's possible in the physical universe that God or the gods, the Elohim, have created. Okay, that's one level. At some point, somebody, I think it may have been God, or may have been a collusion between God and some of the other senior creators, they came up with this idea of karma. They, well, this physical incarnation is all well and good, but like everybody has equal opportunity, everybody gets to have the same experience, and it gets kind of boring after a while. We need to wait for people to kind of feel like they're getting graded on the whole thing. And social media is today. You want to look at your number of likes and shares and how popular you are to see how you're doing in playing this game of incarnation. And that's how the rule of karma was introduced. It's like, okay, let's create a way of scoring the system and rewarding souls and for achievement in incarnation, and making it a little bit hard in that, let's add another rule. It's too easy if you go become a star and that you've been a god, a spiritual, unlimited spiritual entity in the spiritual realm. Takes all the fun out of it. So let's add reincarnation amnesia, so you forget about all your powers. You don't necessarily have the powers you had in heaven. You have to live in this restricted world of experience that whatever form you chose to incarnate in has. And by this time, there's maybe somebody has arranged for the creation of DNA and the blossoming of the soul vehicles we call life. Trees, plants, even some which maybe have the ability to carry some of the consciousness that you have in the spirit world with you for free thinking, as opposed to just thinking within the box of that soul vehicle. I mean, who knows? Rocks maybe have very interesting spiritual lives. I don't know. I can't recollect ever being one. The recollections I have of being in other forms leads me to know that there is a very different level of experience in different species. And it's not all in one direction. Plants have a very, very rich spiritual life, but it's a life that is, in many cases, more of a hive mind kind of thing. It's more of a, if there is this concept of the Gaia as a single being, well, that is kind of a part of the plant kingdom. And if you look at, what they're discovering now about how plants communicate and the sort of neural networks that they develop between them, especially in